Here's how we start. I start every time I start to study, every time I pick up the word. I pray Ephesians 1:17 and 18. The God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give to us the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of him, having the eyes of our hearts enlightened, that we may know what is the hope to which he has called us, and what we are the riches glorious of his inheritance in the saints. We just want the word to come alive and well. We want the wisdom of the word, and it's all about Jesus from the cover to cover. So it's all about Jesus. So, the first prophecy in your Bible, God prophesied to a serpent and said, because you did this, there's going to be, it's not enmity, we're not going to get along with each other, okay? And you're going to bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. And so the first prophecy given goes all the way from the fall to redemption. And then everything else falls in between that we get in the Word. And the next prophet that we see that's really understands stuff is Enoch. And Enoch was 65 years old and he had his son. And something triggered in him, and he looked up to the heavens and acknowledged God. And then for 300 years, he walked with God and talked with God. And he got all this wisdom poured into him because he asked the questions. And that's the way we're wired. If we want to know and we want to ask and we want to sit in his presence, he'll tell us. Because we're his kids. It's like, my son asked me a question growing up. I wanted to answer it and help him grow up. And so that's what he does. And so Enoch had this phenomenal testimony that he walked with God. And it said that God took him. Now, Meline 13, okay? Did he say, I see the rapture in the future, you're going to do that, and I'll take mine now? God said, well, it's not time for that yet. Wait a minute, though. Wait, if you're going to do that in the future, I'm not going to be there. I want to experience that. I'll take mine now. And so God took him. And then in the book of Jude, he wrote, the Lord's coming back with 10,000s of his saints. Jude, how do you know that? Where'd that come from? How do you know that? Again, he's seeing the beginning from the end. And that's what God does. So that's why Enoch is our hero, is that he started at the front. He spent so much time with God. He got the answer to all of his questions and all the things that he wanted to know. And then God even added to him, we're coming back, and I'm bringing back all the saints with me. And we're coming back to rule and reign for 1,000 years. And so Enoch said, now, I see that there's going to be judgment on this earth because of how corrupt it's getting. So he named his son Methuselah, which means after this it shall come, knowing that there's going to be judgment on the earth and there's going to be the flood that's going to wipe it out. So the reason I'm talking about them is because the people that get these prophecies put all these things together. So when I started studying prophecy, and I'm reading in the book of Isaiah, and I see all this stuff. Where does it fit? And then I read the book of Daniel, and I take it apart, and I put it back together, and where does all this fit? What are all these timelines where all these things come together? So then, to me, it's a great big jigsaw puzzle. And every number, everything has to fit. And so for years, I made charts and things and did all these things. And anyway, it's like Perego. It's in there somewhere. It's just, and I get to rambling. So you got to slow me down and ask me questions. It's not a problem. Okay, I got to do so. I like to start with Jesus at the Olivet Discourse. When Jesus before he rode into Jerusalem, he told the disciples, he said, go in there and you'll find a colt and bring it to me and I'm going to ride on it. If he asks you, what are you doing with my donkey? He said, the master wants to use it. So Jesus decides to ride into Jerusalem and be proclaimed as a Messiah. They call him the Son of David, and they call him, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. And they're doing all of this stuff. But he rides in on a donkey, on a colt, as opposed to a white horse and a chariot. Because Jesus lowers himself to our lowest commodity, like he did when he was born in a barn, And that's what he does. He comes so humble to give us the example of what he's going to do. So anyway, he rides in, and he's fulfilling the prophecies that were given. Somewhere. Anyway, the prophecy about he would come in on a donkey. And so he's fulfilling the prophecy. He knows what he's doing as he's fulfilling prophecies. You can see this all the way to the right end to back to the cross. He's fulfilling all the prophecies. He says, so all things will be fulfilled. So he comes into Jerusalem, and he's fulfilling 3 prophecies. Zechariah 9:9 says, daughter of Zion, shout loud, the daughter of Jerusalem, behold, your king is coming to you righteous and having salvation, humble, mounted on a donkey. And then they said, blessed, they start singing about who he is. And Psalms 118 says, bless he who comes in the name of the Lord. And then they said he's from Nazareth because he was called a Nazarene. Now, did the zealots that were in that crowd think he was going to overthrow Rome today? Is that what they were yelling about? They thought he was going to do this, and yet he comes on that donkey and seems so humble. And then what he does, I'm sorry, but I think he went to pick a fight. He went to the temple and started kicking over tables and the money changers. He took a whip he made but it's cloth whip, not a metal one, and he whipped them out of the thing, and he said, my house won't be called a den of thieves. And the money changers, if you went to the temple and you were going to make a sacrifice and buy one of the lambs, you have to have temple money. So I'd give you $20 and you'd give me back 15, and then I could spend 15 on the lamb. And so the money changers were in there making money on the money. I think we do that today. But anyway, the money changers were inside the temple where they weren't supposed to be. And he said, this is supposed to be a house of prayer. So he turned over all the tables and kicked them out. And Isaiah 56:7 said, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. Jeremiah 7 says, in this house, which is called by my name, you are a den of robbers. And behold, I have seen it, and I declare it to the Lord. Then after he did this, we're in between the entry and the cross. And so Jesus cleans out the temple, but he stays in the temple, and it said that the blind and the lame came and he healed them. He's still doing what his Messiah work is at. And he said, and so then they're yelling out, the blind and the lame came to him, the temple, and he healed them. I'm in Matthew 24, verse 14. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. And when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things he did, and the children cry out the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant, and they said, do you hear what they're saying? And Jesus said, have you never read out of the mouth of infants, nursing babies, you have prepared praise? So then he starts on the Pharisees, and the Pharisees and the scribes, and tells them that they're a brood of serpents, and they don't pay attention to they do the little things in the word, but they don't love the word, and they don't love what the word's supposed to produce. It's one thing to have a lot of knowledge about the Bible. It's another thing to have the word work for you and work for the people around you because of the love nature that the word produces. And he says in Matthew 23, he said, you measure up the Father's guilt, you serpent, you brood of vipers. How can you escape the condemnation of hell? Therefore I will send you prophets, wise men, scribes. Some you will kill and crucify. Some you will scourge in the synagogues and persecute city to city. That on you will come the righteous blood on the earth, from Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of who was murdered on the temple. I say to you, All these things will come upon this generation. Now, generation has two meanings. One is the 70 years given in the Psalms, 70, that's your generation. The other one is this people that I'm talking to, their generations, when they die out, it will happen. Now, when he talks about the generation of the Jews have never died out. You don't know any Babylonians, and you don't know any, Persians, they're all gone. The only group that has stayed identified since this time is the Jewish people. And this generation hasn't died out, but the rest of them have died out. And so it's this thing he's talking that he just quoted, he talks about shedding the blood of those and everything else. The Pharisees hired a guy named Saul of Tarsus to go and and to harass the Christians that were standing outside of the thing to fulfill this prophecy. Then Jesus went outside the temple. Now, he's walking out of the temple. The disciples, don't you think they want to change his mindset? They're in the middle of this fight. And can we calm this down a little bit? Can we get to where, he said, see this beautiful temple and all these beautiful arraignments there. And Jesus said, not one stone will be left upon another. Oh, come on. Jesus, what? And he said, they went out of the temple, and the disciples said to him, I'm in Mark 13:1, Teacher, see what manner of stones and buildings there are. And Jesus said, do you see these buildings? Not one stone will be left on another. In 70 AD, when the Jews were all expelled from Jerusalem, and the Romans took over, and there was a general came in, and they burnt the temple. Well, all of the gold on the top melted down the temple into all the cracks. And so the soldiers could make money by grabbing the gold. So they took every stone apart and took all the gold off. And so it was physically answered that every stone was removed out of its place so they could get the stone. Then, after they took them out, the Romans took Jerusalem and leveled it, and then they sowed it with salt so vegetation wouldn't grow. They wanted it to be a complete barren land, which it was obviously for years. And then Daniel 9:26 says, after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The people of the prince to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, which he's talking about the Roman Empire at that time, and the people that come out of them that control the world. There's always been when Rome fell, Alexander took over. There's always somebody else in control, and the end of it will be a flood, and at the end of the desolation. See, what they wanted the Messiah that was in Isaiah 11, where the 7 fruits of the Spirit were given, and he said, the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him in wisdom and understanding and counsel and might, knowledge and fear. And you see those 7 spirits here. You also see them in the book of Revelation when it talks about the 7 candlesticks and the 7 spirits of God. It's the same thing. And his delight will be in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge by the eyes or see disputes what he hears in his ears. With righteousness he will judge the poor, decide the equity of the equity of the meek, and he shall strike the earth with the rod of his breath. And righteousness will be on his the righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. And then it talks about the wolf and the lamb will lay down together, and they'll eat grass. And when we get to it, I have a picture of this that my nephew painted of Isaiah 11, of the lion and the lamb laying down, and the eating grass, and the sun playing on the hole of the viper, and all. I said to my nephew was a very, very artistic, very talented young man. He was a junior at the University of Arkansas, And I said, Jeff, I gave him a $100 bill, and I said, if you can paint me this picture, I got another one to pass it up. And about 4 months later, he called me and said, Uncle Chuck, I got a picture for you. It's an original oil painting. It's gorgeous, of this painting. It's hanging in our family room at home. It's just a gorgeous to get this. And he put 2 children in there. And they look a lot like my son and my daughter. Wow. It is gorgeous, yeah. So they were looking for this one. Jeremiah 23 said, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king, deal wisely, and execute justice and righteousness in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell secured, and this name of the Lord shall be called the Lord of our righteousness. And the waters will flow out of Jerusalem. We were in Jerusalem, and when you're looking into the city, there's a valley called the Kidron Valley, and there's a stream running through there. And then across the Kidron Valley is the Mount of Olives. It's over here. And there's a little, I just call it kind of a little parapet, a place you can walk and stand and look down into Jerusalem. He says that on that day, living waters will flow out of Jerusalem, and half to the eastern sea, and half to the western sea. And it shall continue in summer as in winter, and the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day will be one, his name is one. Zechariah 14. We're going to get to it, but there's an earthquake that divides in that Kidron Valley. Geologically today, there's one of those faults they talk about. And it runs from the Mediterranean all the way to the Dead Sea, down to the Gulf of Aqaba. And so, that crying hasn't stopped. It says in Ezekiel about fishermen along the river. My dad loved to fish. And I had a little black friend at Cornerstone, and I'd go crappie fishing as much as we could, as many times as we want to. And he passed away and went to heaven. My dad passed away when one day I looked at this, and they were sitting side by side fishing in that lake. God sometimes gives you stuff just to encourage you, just to see what is there, and it's remarkable. I don't know if they were catching anything. I'll find out later. But they wanted a Messiah to reign and ruin. But they went over to the Mount of Olives. They sat down, and the disciples asked him three questions. When will all these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming back if you're leaving now? And when will be the end of the age? So Jesus answers their questions, but he answers them in reverse order. And Jesus answered them, Matthew chapter 24, verse 4 and 5. Take heed that no one deceive you, for many will come in my name, saying, I, Christ, and will deceive many. Luke 21:8 says, take heed, don't be deceived, for many will come in my name and saying, I am he, the time is drawn near, don't go after them. Then he says, you hear wars and rumors of wars, and see that you're not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Those things are going to happen, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there'll be famines and pestilence and earthquakes, and these are all the beginning of sorrows. And there'll be a great earthquake. Then in Matthew 24:9, he says, Matthew 24:13, he said, but he who endures to the end will be saved. And in Mark 13, he says the same thing. He who endures to the end will be saved. And then Luke 21:19, he says, by your patience you can possess your souls. So there's going to be tribulation in the world, and there's going to be personal tribulation until he comes, until the end of the age. And then there's, in Revelation 7, and it talks about the martyrs under the altar, that have been martyred for their faith. And I looked in these things, and behold, a great multitude no one could number, of tribes, peoples, tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes with palm branches, crying with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels sit around the throne, and the elders and the four living creatures fell on their faces before the throne, saying, Amen, blessing, glory, wisdom, thanksgiving, honor, and might be to our God forever and ever. That's the end of the martyrs. And so they have to go through all this to be able to get to that place where they stand before him. Now in Matthew chapter 24, verse 14, he answers their question. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to the entire world, and then the end will come. This is one point that Pastor Dave and I have had discussion on. In Revelation chapter 14, verse 6 and 7, it says, then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven. Now, in Revelation chapter 14, I'm in the tribulation period. And I'm in the last half of the tribulation, which is the great tribulation period. And in Revelation 14, 6 and 7, he said, I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach, to dwell on the earth, from every tongue, every tribe, every tongue, and every people, saying with a loud voice, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made the heaven and the earth and the seas and the springs of water. So this angel is finally going to be released to preach the gospel, and he's going to preach it to every tribe, every nation, every tongue. We can't get to him physically today. There's some places that physically you can't get there. You can read in the South America, some of those places in the woods. So I heard it taught on Sid Roth that the satellites fill this question. They preach the gospel over the entire world, and everybody can do that. So there's many venues you can take, but I'm kind of a literist on stuff, and I don't think anything for the end of age holding Jesus back has to do with us. I don't think it's us. It's not a job that we have to do to get him to come back. It's who he is, what he's planned to do, and when he's going to do it. And there's criteria that fits into it based on what we're going to see in the Word, but that's it. So he answers this question. He said, this gospel will be preached to the end of the kingdom, and then the end will come. So then the next question he asked, he said, what will be the sign of your coming? And he says in Luke 21:20, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation is near. And when you see the abomination of desolation spoke by Daniel the prophet in the holy place, understand and flee Jerusalem. And the Antichrist will make a covenant with many for 1 week. In the middle of the week, he will end the sacrifice and bring on abomination. And in Daniel 11, he will return and show no regard for the holy covenant. So when Daniel was praying, the angel came and said, okay, I'm going to answer your questions. He said there's 70 times 7. We're going to get to all that. But anyway, there was 490 years given to Daniel from the time that Ezra was told to go rebuild the temple. From that time until Messiah the Prince would be 483 years. Now, based on the time frame that was given to Daniel, from what we know in history, Jesus rode into Jerusalem 483 years. There's 7 years left on the Jewish calendar that weren't fulfilled. So that's the 7 years of tribulation that we talk about, that fills up the Jewish time and puts it back together. And it's sort of like there's a gap in there, and this is the time of the Gentiles, but there will be that tribulation time. And the tribulation time, the Okay. There's 7 years of tribulation that's going to happen, and that's in the book of Revelation, and we're going to talk about all that as we get down there. I'm trying to slow down. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So when you see this abomination of desolation, so when that is, there was a general under Alexandria called Antiochus Epiphanes. He went into the temple, he sorted the temple out, and he sacrificed a hog on the temple. That's for the abomination of desolation, to desecrate the altar and do it, obviously, with a pig, since it was against the Jewish religion to eat the pork. Then he says in Matthew 24, let him who's on the housetop not go back to take anything out of the house. Let him not get his clothes. Woe to those who are pregnant and nursing babies. Pray that you get out. Matthew 21:21 says, let those in Jerusalem flee to the mountains. Let those depart to their midst. Let them run away and get out of there. Woe to them that are there. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive by nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles. So he's telling them there that they can to get away and get out of town. Where are they going to go? I mean, I don't know if how many of you have been to Israel? I mean, Jerusalem Israel's a small state, and Jerusalem's on this Mount Zion. It's a hill. We don't call it a mountain. It's a hill, Zion, and when you leave, you go downhill to Jericho, and then from Jericho there's the River Jordan, and across the River Jordan you go into Moab, Moab. And in Moab was the, what was the other son's name? Isaac and, anyway, it's the Arab countries. And there's a city that's carved out of sandstone called Petra. And it's gorgeous. And we flew into Jordan, and we took a bus to Petra, and they got a beautiful temple when you come in. That's all carved out of sandstone. It all stands and thing, and it's kind of a rose-colored courts. And to get there, you have to get down this very narrow pathway. And so they had these beautiful horses. They had these tired old donkeys. and you had a guy that in shabby clothes and little beat up sandals, and they would guide you down in there. And he said, he's taking me down, and he said, good horse. Good tip. That's how he makes his living. But it was so narrow that when the Jeep went in there, they had to fold in their mirrors. And I could almost touch both walls to get in there. And then you get inside there, and there's a huge amphitheater. It's carved out of the rocks, and you can sit in all your little stone seats. And then it's all filled with caves. All over this thing is filled with caves. And we were told that Christians come in there and take Bibles and stick them in all those caves. So when this happens, and this is where it says in Isaiah 16, from Selah to the wilderness, to the mount of daughter Zion, it shall be as a wandering bird thrown out of a nest. And so shall the daughter of Moab at the ford of Ammon take counsel, execute judgment, and make shadows. In the middle of the night, hide the outcast, don't betray him who escaped, and let the outcast dwell with you. So he's talking to Moab, and he's talking about his people. Isaiah chapter 26 says, come, my people, enter your chambers, shut the doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little moment until the indignation pass. And behold, the Lord comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. And the earth will disclose her blood and no longer cover her stain. Revelation 12:6 says, the woman will flee to the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God. She will feed them there for 1,260 days, the last half of the tribulation period. God always has a remnant, and God always has a way of escape for his people. And in the natural, I don't know where else they would go, but that's, I don't know what God has planned. And if he takes them there, is he going to feed them manna and water from the rocks? I mean, he's going to do something. And the Antichrist, he wants to get rid of the Jews. When God made a covenant with Abraham and made him his chosen people, in the spiritual realm, the fight started. Satan says, if I can stamp out the Jews, I win, because God's promise won't come true. So that's been a constant battle in the spiritual realm. In the physical realm, he drives it in on the Jewish people, and they've been harassed all the time since then. So, but when the Antichrist comes after them, it says he comes in, but like a flood, he's pointed out. Well, again, in my little puzzle book, Daniel chapter 40 says that there's tidings from the east, and he has to turn to address that instead of going after them. And so they escape. And if God's going to put the cloud over them like he did the children of Israel, cover them so the jets can't see them and the missiles can't get in, we'll have to ask him later, because I don't know. So, because then there will be great tribulation. And then, in Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Then the Son of Man shall be appear, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven in great power and glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet and gather together his elect from the four winds of heaven. Just like Enoch has written in Jude, he elects from heaven, and we come back with 10,000 saints to rule and reign. Now, here's the good news. Luke 21:28 says, when all these things begin to happen, look up your heads, because your redemption draws nigh. So all these things are going to be answered. So that he has answered the question number 2. Now, he answers question number 1. When will these things be? The third question. Matthew chapter 24, verse 32. Now learn this parable of the fig tree. When its branches are ready and tender, it puts forth leaves, summer's near. So also when you see these things, know that it's near and at the door. Surely I say to you, this generation shall by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not. So the fig tree, from what he just said, that experiences the generation that sees the fig tree blossoming is the final generation, and the fig tree is Israel. We've given 2 for witness in Hosea chapter 9 and Joel chapter 1, where he talks about his fig tree, Israel. So Jesus said, when you see all these things pass away, but when the fig tree blossoms, know that it's nigh and at the door. Now, Jesus said, no one knows the day and the hour, but not even the angels in heaven. But as the day of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as the day before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day they entered the ark, and didn't know until the flood came and took them. So will be the Son of Man. The two will be left in the field, one will be taken, one left. So we're living in the days of Noah. We all know that. Tonight we've got, I don't know, I can't calculate, 100 people. What are the rest of them doing? And Sunday morning it's the same thing. There's more of them not in church than there is in church. And they're just doing their thing and go out and living life. And we got a good life in America. Everything is coming along pretty good. So in Matthew 24:42, he says, watch therefore, you don't know what hour the Lord's coming, but if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed it. Mark 13 says, take heed, watch and pray. Watch therefore, you don't know when it's going to happen. Take heed, lest your hearts be weighted down. So, according to Luke 21:36, if we watch therefore and pray, we'll be counted worthy to escape all these things that are come to pass and stand before the Son of Man. So that means, from what I can see here, if I stay in relationship with Jesus, I'll escape all this stuff. There's a way out that's he's got planned. If his promise of escape before the tribulation starts, how can I be considered worthy? It's only by the grace of God and the blood of the Lamb. He made me worthy because I accepted his sacrifice of forgiveness of my sins and cleansed me from all unrighteousness according to his word. If I do anything that doesn't please the Father, he gave me 1 John 1:9. I'm quick to confess my sins. He's faithful and just to forgive my sins and get myself cleansed up. You know, I got this white, beautiful robe he's given me, and I get a little stain on it, and you just pour a little blood on it, and it cleans it up, you know. It's just a little blood brush. So, and in Revelation chapter 3:10, it says, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that's coming on the world to try those who made it. So there's a way of escape. Questions? Comments? You guys got all that fast, huh? That's good. We're a remarkable audience. Okay.
You were alluding to, or you were talking about Revelation 14, and you alluded to the conversations I had with you. And so where that conversation came from is, I've always said, that we have to be here to be a witness. We've got to be here for the people to come in. And so that's where Chuck has brought up that verse, that the angel declares the gospel. And so I think it's a good point. So, I just wanted to clarify the conversation.
Okay, yeah.
What about the 144,000?
What's that?
What about the 144,000?
What did you say?
What about the 144,000? They're going to be proselytizing to the Jewish people.
Who are they?
They're Jewish.
They're Jewish, the 144,000?
12 tribes.
You're sure? Where do you get that?
From Revelation.
Okay. We're way ahead of yourself. Okay.
I know.
Okay. But the 144,000 are in the tribulation period. Okay. And they are marked and called out. And he's right. They are going to be preachers to the Jewish nation about Jesus Christ. So when it says in that verse in Romans that all of Israel shall be saved, they're part of that crowd. So we'll get there. Okay. With that. Okay. Moving right along then. We're going to go to the fig tree. If the fig tree blossomed, we know it's at the end of the age, so what's the fig tree doing? 5 things that Jesus said in Matthew 24:32-36. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. When the branches become tender and put forth leaves, you know summer is near. So you also, when you see these things, know it's near and at the door. I say to you, this generation, again, this race of people, or the 70 years will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away. My words will by no means pass away. But at that day and hour, no one knows, even the angels of heaven. So this generation will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. We know from Psalms 90, a generation is 70 years. But the generation also means this race of people. So again, the Jews were dispersed in 70 AD and sent around the world. But they still have their identity. They can't get rid of it even if they don't want to. Even if they want to, it starts. And so the generation that sees this start will see this finish, which is the Jewish race. So Hosea 9 and Joel 1 both talk about the fig tree belonging to Israel. And this is a little history lesson, okay, about the fig tree. In 1870, the Zionist movement was started by Theodor Herzl. He was talking to a reporter that was in France, and they were hanging a guy for treason. And as they were hanging him, the crowd was yelling, "Hang the Jew," and it had nothing to do with him being Jewish and his treason. So Herzl decided he had to start forming the Zionist Council to get the Jewish people back together. So in 1897, the ground was prepared for the fig tree. The first Zionist council met to create, their whole thing was to create for the Jewish people a homeland in Palestine secured by public law. So then in 1917, at the end of World War I, General Allenby crossed, there's a bridge in Jerusalem between Jordan and Israel, and called the Allenby Bridge. And when he crossed over that bridge to take back Israel from the Ottoman Empire, he sent a recon plane over Jerusalem. The Arabs inside there had never seen an airplane. And there's a Isaiah 31:5 says, like birds flying about, so the Lord will defend Jerusalem, defending it, he'll pass over it and preserve it. They went home. They said, they got something supernatural here, we're leaving. We walked out. Allenby walked into Jerusalem and never had to fight. He took it all back because they all went out. Wow. In 1917 then, after the World War I, there was a Jewish scientist named Herzl in England, and he invented the bomb that helped them win World War I. So they asked him, he said, what can we do for you? And he said, I want a homeland for my people. We want to go back to Palestine. So Lord Balfour went before the Parliament in England and said, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national homeland for the Jewish people. So in 1917, the tree was planted and prepared in 87, but now 1917. Also in 1917, there was a Bolshevik revolution in Russia, and they overthrew the Tsar and changed it and became the first atheist nation. So we've got two things happening. So then, in 30, when you're a Jewish man and you're 30, you're supposed to move into your manhood calling and fulfill what that calling is. So from 1917, 30 years, now the fig tree blossoms. And in 1947, the League of Nations recognized Israel as a founding nation. The next May, they became a nation in the UN. But in 1947, that 30-year plan, they were there. So in 1948, May 14th, Isaiah 66:8 says, who's heard of such a thing? Who has seen such a thing? Shall the earth give birth in one day? Shall a nation be born at once? And as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children. Fulfilling the scriptures, they came up and they became an established nation. In 1948, when they declared themselves to be a nation, on the 8th day, the day of circumcision for the male, the hostile Arab nations united together and determined to push the Jews back into the sea. They told the British to leave, and if you don't leave, you won't get oil. So the British left. And so they helped block the seaport, and President Truman at this time said they're on their own. Now, here's the miracle working things of God. When we were in Jerusalem, we stayed in a kibbutz, and I got a couple of books. And one of them is called My Man in Damascus. And he was a Jew, he was a jeweler, and they thought he was Arab, and he was a spy. And so they decided Syria was going to build all these bunkers on the Golan Heights to look down into Jerusalem, because you stand on the Golan Heights, you can see all the way over to the Mediterranean Sea, all the way through Haifa and all of them. And so they're going to build these bunkers. And so he recommended the general, he said, it's hot up in those hills and there's no vegetation. You should put some bushes that would have shade or a little tree by those bunkers. So the guy said, good idea. Every bunker was marked. When the war started, you knew exactly where they were if you had a tank. Yeah. So Israel's attacked. Now, you remember now, what we have is the Jews that migrated from Germany and from Russia, from other places, and they're jewelers and they're bankers and they're pharmacists, and they're not warriors. They don't know from war, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden they're getting attacked. So they have to defend themselves. They don't have any modern weapons, very few airplanes. They're outnumbered 30-1 in the natural. They not only won, but the enemy left supplies to help them for years. One of my favorite stories is Herman. Herman had a Volkswagen, and he's close to the border of Jordan, and he's trying to figure out what he can do. So he went out and took the manifold off the Volkswagen, and he started driving across the bunker. There's the natural bunker where the Jordan comes, and just, it dips down as it always does. And he's driving along this thing as fast as he can go, and he's kicking up dust, and his muffler's going, and he's going back and forth up and down this whole thing. He's creating a dust storm and all this noise. And the Jordanians' tanks come, and one of them says, I think the Egyptians came to help them. Look at all that. And they stopped their tanks and ran home, got in the trucks and left the tanks running.
Wow.
So they supplied Israel with their first tanks.
Wow. That's amazing.
And then when the Egyptian tanks come up, they got so bogged down in the sand, and they hadn't really fixed their wheels and stuff. They could have left them, so they did the same thing. They got in and left the tanks. And so Israel had all these tanks. And then the Egyptian pilots went back and landed, and the general, what are you doing? He said, they got a bigger air force than we do. Israel had 3 airplanes. So God sent an angelic force, obviously, supernaturally, to protect his people. They went back. And when the dust settled, the war was over, and Israel had 1 million blankets, 2 million cotton sheets, 50 x-ray machines, 25 years supply of antibiotics, and a huge fuel supply, not to mention the tanks. So it was, God just supernaturally, when you read those things, it was so supernatural what God did for Israel. There's no way in the natural they could win against those forces coming against them. So when Israel was in 48, Israel declared a nation. President Trump then voted yes in the Security Council against the opposition of his whole cabinet. They were telling him not to. But he said, my praying mother put the love of Jews inside me. He said that he did that. And then there was also an agreement made in Belgium and the Netherlands, and they opened up their borders so they could get coal to all these places without going through border checks. And it became what we know now as the European Union. That's how it started in 1948. And there was a meeting in the Netherlands, and church leaders met, and the roots were planted for the World Council of Churches. And their constitution says a fellowship of churches that confesses the Lord Jesus as God and Savior according to the Scriptures, and therefore seeks to fulfill the common calling to the glory of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It sounds really, really good, but they've drifted. And it's sort of like the plaque that's on the entryway to Harvard University talking about the glory of God and why it was established, and they don't even read it and go right past it. So, when you're 12 years old and a Jewish boy, you get bar mitzvahed. And you move into manhood, and they start treating you like a man instead of a boy. In 1960, which would have been 12 years from the 48, the UN recognized Israel as a fully developed nation, and they are now the son of the covenant. Now, 50 years is the year of Jubilee, and in the year of Jubilee, everything is returned to its original owner that owns the land. So if I'm in the tribe of Issachar and I own this plot of land belongs to my family, and I get poor and destitute and I lease out my land to somebody else, and they come and do it, and I go to work at someplace else. At the end of 50 years, I can walk back in, that land's mine. Because that's the Jewish law, because it always belongs to that same heritage. That's why that when you read in the book of Esther, they get married, the child belongs to the other one to keep the family name going. It's what they do. So the end of 50 years, from 1917, when the fig tree was blossomed, 1967. Now in the year of Jubilee, everything's returned to its rightful owner. And the Six-Day War started in 1967. And they took back Jerusalem. They took back the Golan Heights. They took back everything. They left a little bit of the West Bank and Gaza. But the rest of it, Israel claimed the land that was theirs by mandate from Moses when he gave out the land, what God had. Now, it wasn't everything promised to Abraham. That'll come later. But this was, so then a mature man goes to work, and in 1978, at the age of 30, they signed their first peace pact with Egypt at Camp David. At the age of 40, you lay out your future plans. In 1988, Israel declared there would never be another Masada. When we were in Israel, and you go out down to the Dead Sea, it's so salty you can't sink. Pastor Dan was not a good swimmer, but he loved the Dead Sea because he could float. And then they would go pay in the salt mud baths. That's supposed to be really good for you and do all this stuff. And Chuck didn't go down there with that. I played in the mud as a kid. And I had a remarkable experience. The bus driver was an Israeli historian. He taught history at the University of Jerusalem. And in the summertime, he did archaeological digs and stuff. And then he took these guides in periodically. So he was our guide. So I went back to the bus, and I'm sitting. And on the bus, I sat right behind him all the time. I wanted to hear what he was doing and where we were going. And I come back to the bus, and he said, "I'll take you a little trip." So he gave me a little trip. So he took up, and we went down to the road, and all of a sudden he turns off on this little dirt path. He comes up, and there's a little spring and a wadi. He said, on top of that hill, when David was running from Saul, he wrote a psalm. He said, "As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs for you." Hosea chapter 6, verse 1 says, "Come, let us return to the Lord, for he is torn and he will heal. He is stricken, but he will bind us up. After 2 days he will revive us, and on the third day he will raise us up, that we may live in his sight." But beloved, 2 Peter 3:8 says, "But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord is 1 day as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a 1 day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promises," some call slackness, "but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance." In this 2 days, does that mean 2,000 years? On the third day, you raise him back up. We have the story of the Good Samaritan, and the priest went by and didn't help him, and the Sadducee went by and he didn't help him. But the Samaritan came, took him to the inn, paid for him to get up, and then he said to the innkeeper, "Here's 2 denarii, which is 2 days' pay, or two years' pay. And I'll be back. When I come back, I'll pay the rest of it and ransom him out." So it's sort of a time frame for us for the 2,000 years since Jesus to know that we're closer to the end. Again, no man knows the hour and the day, but those are the signposts that we have. And when you have the action that Jesus did when he went from Bethany to the temple and he cursed the fig tree, and it was an example that it had leaves. It looked like it was ready, but there was no fruit on it. And that's when Jesus came to Jerusalem, he said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how if you had taken time to understand who I was and what I was, all this could have been taken care of, but you didn't do that." He said so. Israel looked like it was ready to embrace the Messiah, but they were not. They weren't looking for a suffering Savior. They were looking for a white horse rider. So they're going to get a white horse rider in Revelation chapter 6, verse 1, and then the right one comes back in Revelation chapter 19. Okay, questions or comments on our history lesson? Nobody even challenges anything, huh? Chuck just talks and you say, "Okay." Okay. What time is it?
I guess I have a
7:03. Okay.
My husband is a big history buff. I guess my question is, why do there appear to be so many people today who don't believe that the land in Israel is actually the Jews' land? Does that make sense? Like, there's somebody that say it's not their land. They went in and conquered it.
Martin Luther said that we were Israel, that Israel lost their position because of the crucifixion. And even though they crucified a Jew and they were Jewish, but he said that he turned a lot of the population against. And so this thing, I'll think of the name tonight, but it's British Israelism, and it says that we've been grafted into Abraham. And so we don't need the Israel anymore. And Jesus made a new covenant based on the New Testament, so we don't need the Old Testament anymore. And so the promises made to Israel are really ours, according to that. And they don't need to have the Jews involved in anything. And that's part of the teaching that people have, but that's not it. When God made a covenant with Abraham, the covenant that he made, he did it with himself. He had Abraham, lay out the sacrifices, and the burning furnace and the burning lamp came and walked in a figure 8 through all the sacrifices. So the blood trail never stops, never ends. It just It doesn't begin. It's a constant blood flow. And he said that we make this covenant for the land for you, but we're going to make it so there's no weak link, because man is the weak link in all covenants. And so he made it with himself. And so that land belongs to Israel. And God doesn't have a backup light or a do-over or a change. He's God. And this is what we're going to do. And the enemy just knows if they could, he just wants to kill the Jewish and stop all this stuff, and they just won't do it. And we're going to read about all the promises that God has made for the Jews to come back to the land. They know what's going to happen in the end, and they just don't know when it's going to happen. They want it, we all want McDonald's mentality. We want it today, and don't make me wait too long today. It's just, but it's, unfortunately, there's so many of the Jews that got so complacent because of they have so much tradition that you can't get relationship if you're just doing tradition. You got to have relationship, and that's what happens to so many of them. That's all they do. Yeah, I'm a Jew because my mom was, and I don't understand it, but they don't have any relationship. Now, when it comes to high holy days, it's sort of like our Easter and Christmas. They get a lot of people come up on Day of Atonement. They get a pretty good turnout at the synagogue, but that's not what they do every day. It's not what they are. It's like us. We have to keep ourselves fed all the time. We have to be in the Word and getting into prayer. We do it. You can't just let it turn into a tradition. So it's. But that's why they do that. It's just, and it's. And God is calling them back. Linda and I were she was talking in prayer about, what's happening in New York with the socialism coming in there, and it's going to drive the Jews out. Even though they voted him in, it's going to drive the Jews out. And just think about this. What is going to happen to the economy in New York City if 250 Jewish jewelers and businessmen leave tomorrow and go back to Israel? Somebody built an apartment complex? Huh?
They bought an apartment complex.
How much?
Enough for 200. 200
people in an apartment they just built for those to be able to come that want to come from exile and come in. So if you're Jewish, if you have Jewish blood, you'll be a citizen in the morning. They sign you up, So yeah.
The question about the land, and you alluded to this, that there's truth to the fact that we're grafted in by faith into Israel, into Abraham's promises and stuff. The mistake comes when they feel like then that negates the Jewish people. That it's called replacement theology, and then that bleeds over. Then they begin to talk about the land, and there's all kinds of what's the word I'm looking for? Edited history, rewritten history on all of that, But the fact is that we've been grafted in, but God makes it very clear in Romans 9 and 11 that He still has plans for the Jewish people. And He is very clearly, if you want to, you look at it, very clearly speaking of those of Jewish blood, the biological Jew, not the Jew by faith. And we, in one sense, we are children of Abraham. We've been grafted in, but that doesn't negate their place. And so that's used often. And I've heard I've heard this more in the last 2 years than I've heard it in all the years prior. Talking about, well, the Jewish people are no longer God's chosen people. They are, we're God's chosen people. I even heard, Charlie Kirk. There was an interview with somebody, and he said, "Chosen people? How can they be as chosen? I thought everybody was chosen." And it's because of a misunderstanding of what that term means. Chosen doesn't mean saved. Chosen doesn't mean loved. Chosen means that they are the vessel through whom God will move, whether they're saved or not. And God chose Israel, and God chooses the foolish things, the small things, and that tiny little nation has been at the epicenter of so much history. And God chose them. And that doesn't change. That doesn't make us God's chosen people because we've gotten saved. Salvation and being chosen are two separate things. That's apples and oranges. Salvation is we get to go to heaven. He abides with us. Chosen, he's going to use that person. It's very similar to the New Testament concept of the call of God. People say, well, I'm called to ministry. God chooses people and says, I'm going to use you. And the fact is, I know I've got a call on my life, and God will use me. Now, I can do it the hard way, or I can do it the easy way. He can use me, and I could be very miserable in the process, or I can yield to him. And that's very similar with Israel. He is using them. And just the proof of that, Chuck, those stories you just told, it's just amazing. And it's throughout the founding of that as a nation. There are so many stories of miraculous intervention. And when they went into the war recently, there was a headline about how angels are taking out our missiles, one of the Muslims said, because they could not get a strike. And that's just par for the course with the Jewish people. They're chosen, and all Israel will be saved. There's going to be a sweeping revival before this thing called history wraps up. And Israel will welcome back their Messiah.
Yeah. Amen. Okay.
Amen.
Huh?
Jew and Gentile coming together, one new man.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to talk about the preservation and return of Israel to verify what we've been talking about. So, when God made that, when he called Abraham out and said, I want you to come, I'm going to give you 4 commands. You come out and get away from your family, and we're going to go to a land you don't know and everything else. And how would you like to be Sarah? He comes home and says, pack the camels, we're moving. Where are we going? Well, I don't know. God just told me to go, so we're going. Which direction are we going? I know which direction. We're going to go that way, but are you sure, Abe? Yeah, I'm sure. Pack the camels, we're going, And we're leaving Dad, Mom, Dad, uncles, we're leaving. We're going. Well, God's going to show us. So it's, he did. He left and he went, and when he got to as soon as he crossed over the river and got into, I think the first place he stopped was Bethel and sacrificed to the Lord. And then he moved him and he ended up in Hebron. And God said, look at the stars, and that's how many kids you're going to have. And your heritage is going to be that big, and the dust of the seas. And Abraham said, I don't even have any kids yet. Well, we're going to do a miracle. Just hang on, So he has one boy, has Isaac, and everything just expanded, And then Jacob had 2 boys, and Jacob had 12 boys, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And they went into Egypt with 70 in their family and came back out with approximately 4 million people. It's no wonder that the Egyptians got nervous about them taking over. I mean, those Jewish boys, I'll tell you this. And then the Lord said, told Abraham, I will bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. And so when we drove after we left Jordan and went to Petra, we had to go back to Amman and our passports, we had a piece of paper. We couldn't use our passports because you couldn't put a Jewish stamp in it and get out of the airport in Amman. So we had a piece of paper and they stamped that. That was like our visa to get into Jerusalem. And Israel knew what we were doing. And so we're taking the bus and we're leaving Amman, Jordan, and we're driving. And around you, the whole area is kind of scrub oak and rock, and there's a few Bedouins out of the thing, but you really don't see a lot. And it's just kind of poverty-stricken and ugly, So, and you get to the Allenby Bridge, and you cross over the bridge, and as soon as you get down into the valley, there's orange orchards, there's apples, there's roses, there's ponds where they're raising the fish. And it's just, You're kidding. I mean, it's like an oasis in the middle of this whole thing compared to what it was. I will bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. And they just don't, they don't get it. They just keep fighting the whole thing. I said that before, but when God made a promise, the fight started. If the enemy could destroy the bloodline of Abraham, he would win the world. If he could keep Israel from fulfilling its land promise, he would win. The battle line was drawn, and history has proven the intensity. So God reveals these events to his prophets. You remember when he told Abraham, he said, would I hide from Abraham anything, what I'm going to do? And then Amos 3:7 says, the Lord does nothing unless he reveals his secrets to his prophets. And then the remnant in Isaiah 6:12, it says, the Lord has removed men far away in forsaken places or in the midst of the land. But a tenth of them will be in it, and they will return and be for consuming as the oak tree and the stump remains cut down. So the holy seed shall be a stump. Jeremiah 30 says, the word came to Jeremiah saying, this speaks the Lord. Write in a book for yourself and the words I have spoken. For behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will bring back from captivity my people from Israel and Judah. I will cause them to return to the land I gave to their fathers, and they will possess it. So God made a promise. They will. They're coming back. The other night we watched Neil Diamond, the jazz singer. Did you all see that? They're coming to America. His theme song was, they're coming to America. They're coming on the boats, they're coming on the planes, they're coming all around the world, but they're coming to America. They got the same thing now, they're coming to Israel. They're coming back home. They're coming back home. So it says that the prophets have said God will call his covenant people home, and they will be assigned to the nations. Jeremiah 46:27 says, but do not fear, O my servant Jacob. Do not be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, and your offspring from the land of captivity. Jacob shall return and have rest and ease. No one will make him afraid. Do not fear, O Jacob, my servant, says the Lord, for I am with you. Jeremiah 50 says, in those days and times the children of Israel shall come, they and the children of Judah shall continually weeping. They shall seek the Lord their God. They will ask which is the way to Zion, and they will come towards it, join together with the Lord in a perpetual covenant, and they will prophesy. In Isaiah chapter 11, the Lord's given this message to Isaiah, and he says, it shall come to pass in that day the Lord will set a hand to bring him back again the second time. Now, if I'm Isaiah and the Lord says to me, the Lord's going to bring him back a second time, excuse me, sir, when's the first time? I haven't seen a first time being dispersed. Now you're saying a second time, And of course, they were dispersed under Babylonian captivity, and they went in and they came back. And then they were 70 AD, they were dispersed again. So now they're coming back. This is the second time that they're coming back to, this fig tree is a sign to us that they're coming back into the land, and we're getting close to the end. Isaiah 11 says, he will set up a banner for the nations. They will assemble the outcasts from Israel, gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. So Daniel talks about the 70 years of desolation that he was told. And then in Jeremiah 25, he said 70 years will be accomplished, and then the land will come back when they were in Babylonian captivity. So Daniel is praying this prayer and interceding for Israel, and he's confessing their sins so that the people can come back to the land. And then the decree was given to Ezra to go back into the land. And after 7 years are completed, Babylon, I will visit you, perform my good work. So Daniel was interceding, and the angel revealed to him the end of the age. And he said, Daniel, 70 weeks are determined for your people in your holy city. And here's why: to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make a reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know then and understand from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem the prince, there'll be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The streets will be willed in the falls, and the walls in troublesome times. Now, if you're familiar with the book of Nehemiah, when he went back to build the walls of Jerusalem, the people that were already there liked it the way it was because they had control and power. And so they didn't like Nehemiah doing this. And so Nehemiah went back and built the walls anyway. And he did it in an extremely short time that you normally can't do it. So he could build the walls in troublesome time. So from the time the decree was made to go back and build the walls, that's the first 7 years that he's talking about. Then 62 weeks, and I told you about that when Jesus rode in on the 62 weeks, or the weeks of years is what they're called, and it's 483 years. Jesus rode in and was cut off. So maybe next time I'll do it I'll do Daniel on a board, okay, so you can see all the 70 weeks and 70 and all this stuff. It's kind of jumbled. So the Jews were dispersed in 70 AD, and General Titus was type of the Antichrist, and they crucified 1 million Jews on the Roman Empire. And I said something before about we went down to the Dead Sea, to Masada. Masada is a city that's on a hill, and it's straight up. It's I would guess it to be 16 stories, 20 stories. I mean, it's just a huge mound, and there's a city up on the hill, and there's one pathway up that you have to climb up to get there. And when we went up we took the cable car up to Masada, and they had the little rooms cut out where all this stuff was. And in one of the rooms, he showed us over in the corner, there was some like acorn shells or seeds. He said, we took some of those seeds and planted them, and they took us over there where they were sprouting. So the seeds were still seeds. They were still good because of the arid air that's there. They didn't rot. And when Jerusalem was taken over, a group of the priests left and went to Masada because it was so hard they could be safe from so the Roman Empire came and started building a siege wall, pushing up the sand to get a siege wall to get into Masada. And they put the Jewish captives in the front so the Jewish archers in Masada wouldn't shoot them because they were brothers and sisters. And so anyway, they ended up, and when they got close to taking it over, the priests decided that they were not going to let the Roman Empire crucify them and make all their children and wives suffer. So everybody was killed, and the last one committed suicide. And so after the 67 war, when they got control of all this land, the Israeli army put up a sign that said, "No more, never again Masada." So they'll fight to the last man. They're not giving up. When Pilate, in Matthew 27, when Pilate saw he couldn't prevail against, but rather the tumult, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude and said, "I'm innocent of the blood of this person. You see to it." And all the people answered, "His blood will be on us and our children." And that's what they got. So to become an example, the Romans plowed Jerusalem. It was sowed with salt so it couldn't grow. Since that time, the Jews have been hunted and hated. If Satan could wipe out the Jews, then God's covenant with Abraham wouldn't be fulfilled and he would win. But God always has a remnant, and they always have false gods. Another little history lesson for the Jewish people: the Crusaders were set out. Their whole task was to kill the Jews. I mean, that to wipe out they called them Christ killers, and that they were doing, even though Jesus was Jewish. And the Mongolian hordes were taught they could go to Mecca for killing a Jew, and it's still in the mind today. And in the Arab schools, they teach the children to hate the Jews. They grow up in, that's what's poured into their mind, is that, so they can't get over it. They just grow up that way, that the Jews are vile and evil, and they don't think of them any other way. And they don't, until the Messiah comes and they get it. Now, on the other side, Jesus is, there's so many, if you ever watch Sid Roth and it's Supernatural, there's so many Arab people, they're having a confrontation with Jesus. He's showing up into their life, and they realize that he's the Messiah, and they're starting to spread the word. There's a huge Christian population in Iran. There's a couple million in China that are, so, God's moving wherever he is. He's always got a remnant. He's always got a people. And if anybody will respond, he's going to show up. I mean, in 1492, Queen Isabel of Spain sent Christopher Columbus to go find a new world. And he sent 800,000 Jews adrift to sea with no way back. In 1900, the Russian Tsar murdered and burned villages just because they were Jewish. And 70% of all the Jews in England and the U.S. are of Russian descent. And Stalin murdered 1 million of them, and then, of course, Hitler did 6 million. There are 6 nations that have enough abundance of food that they can export. United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Israel. And they all have a peace pact with Israel. I'll bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. Well, you all know the story of the Valley of the Dry Bones. That's how Israel coming back, and they look at the land and they're just dry bones, and then God's going to breathe on them, and there's flesh and sinews, and they come back, and they'll be his God and they'll be his people.
Hey, thank you for watching this teaching from Heartland Church today. Could you take a moment and subscribe to our YouTube channel? That way you'll get more teachings as they come out. I want to also take this opportunity to invite you to one of our worship services on Sunday morning. You can attend in person or online. We hope to see you there.